This is episode 2 with Mark Ford. Hi, my name is Mike Dillard, and this is Self-Made Man, the podcast for men who want to leave their mark on the world and create a legacy of honor, integrity, and achievement in every aspect of their lives. I'm glad you're here, and once again, it is time to forge your destiny. Hello and welcome to the Self-Made Man podcast. This is Mike Dillard, and today I have the privilege of introducing you to a gentleman who's had a huge impact on my life and the lives of millions of other entrepreneurs over the years, Mr. Mark Ford. Now, most of you will actually know Mark by his pen name, which is Michael Masterson, and his best-selling book, Ready, Fire, Aim. But what you might not know is that Mark is an extremely successful investor, and today he's here to share some of his biggest lessons learned when it comes to building lifelong wealth. And a great example of that you're going to hear about today is how you can guarantee that you grow richer and wealthier every single month for the rest of your life, how he built his personal fortune, and what he's teaching his kids today about money in order to set them on a path for success and financial freedom. So if you enjoy today's lesson as much as I did, I would be extremely grateful if you would take 30 seconds out of your day to give Self-Made Man a 5-star review on iTunes and to share this episode with your friends. So once again, thank you so much for joining us, and here is Mark Ford. All right, we're here today with Mark Ford. Mark, thank you so much for joining us on one of the premier episodes of the Self-Made Man podcast. Welcome.
Thank you, Mike. Happy to be here.
Well, first and foremost, I've got to say thank you for taking the time out of your incredibly busy schedule to join us here today. And, you know, when I sat down a month ago and I made my dream list basically of who I wanted to interview for the first set of episodes in Self-Made Man, your name was really the one and only person that I listed when it came to the topic of finance and investing, primarily because I've learned so much from you and the work that you've been doing over at Palm Beach, but your books as well. You know, Automatic Wealth is the one I've been digging into over the past month or two here, over the past few years when it comes to this topic, really than anybody else. So I'm extremely grateful that I have the opportunity to introduce you to my followers and listeners here today on the podcast. So once again, thank you for being here and taking the time.
Well, it's very nice of you to say, and I hope I can say something that merits their attention.
Without
so fire away.
You know, it's interesting as men specifically, who is my target audience with this podcast. One of the fundamental things that defines us is that we are wired to be protectors and providers. And obviously in today's modern age, money and financial health really is one of the, if not the primary measures of a man's ability to protect and provide. And yet the topics of money, of investing, savings, and financial security are obviously not taught in schools anymore other than, Economics 101. And so it becomes this topic that has to be pursued independently out of your own will and desire, and it has to be tracked down, hunted down. And then you find that when you get into it, it's so broad and vast that it's unbelievably easy to get lost in and to make mistakes. But, along my pursuit of this subject matter, you come across individuals like yourself who have navigated that ocean successfully over the decades, and you didn't do it by striking it lucky with a few big investments. But from what I have gathered, studying your work and reading your books over the years, you've been able to do it by applying some very strategic values and principles over a long period of time. So I wanted to see if we could start there, if you could share some of your core values when it comes to money that have really allowed you to build wealth over the course of decades.
Well, I'm not sure I would say values, but we'll figure out what these are after I say them. But I could say that there are some observations I've made that I carry with me today, based on the experience that I had, positive and negative, that I talk to people about today that are interested in hearing what I have to say about wealth building. And these are the kind of things I talk to the people that are working for me, my proteges, my clients, whatever. And these are based on just experiences I had, starting off with nothing and making some bad decisions and some good ones. And so let me just list a few of them for you and see if these get us anywhere. One thing is that I feel that every every life situation that you enter into is an opportunity to become richer or poorer in some way. And that if you start to look at your life that way, you can take better advantage of all these opportunities. In any given day, there may be, 20 or 50 such opportunities. I don't mean somebody calls you up and says, "Hey, I just heard about a gold mine in Nicaragua."
Mm-hmm.
That's hardly the kind. I'm talking about an employee invites you to lunch, or you invite your boss to lunch, or you start looking through a magazine to make a decision about what kind of car you want to buy, or you talk to your father and he's concerned about his retirement, and all these little personal situations are really opportunities you go into them, and if you're conscious of them, you can see them as a chance to become richer in some way or poorer. Now, some commercial transactions are very obvious. If you get in a conversation with a broker and he's trying to talk you into buying an investment that he's recommending, you have to have a level of consciousness that tells you, well, if I buy this thing, I will instantly become poorer by the amount of investment I'm making. He's going to instantly become richer by the amount of commission he's making, and I need to be aware of that. And whether the asset that I'm buying will eventually become more valuable than what I paid for it is a question I got to analyze. So these commercial transactions are a little bit more obvious, but the lunches and that you have, being conscious and being available to be in the present and recognize that this is an opportunity. And when I say to become richer, of course, I don't mean financially richer, but richer in any possible way, richer in knowledge, richer in trust, richer in friendship. So, this to me is something that I try to practice every day. I try to be aware of. Of course, this is a secret to living a fully aware life. But, a lot of the things that we do in life, we do kind of without thinking, and they rob us of the richest of our lives. Even the question of what are you going to watch? What kind of entertainment do you engage in? What kind of there's TV shows that will make you richer when you're done with them, and you'll feel richer. You'll feel smarter. You'll feel energized. You'll feel excited. And then there are TV shows that kind of entertain you. They're kind of neutral. And then there are TV shows that you feel kind of dirty when you get done with them. And that's poor. So that's one kind of general observation. It's about being kind of aware of situations and just consciously asking yourself, what am I doing here? And one thing you don't want to be is unaware. You don't want to be in a situation and just doing it routinely, because then you're just wasting time. You're not really getting much out of it. And it is an opportunity. And if you're conscious of it, you're going to kind of accelerate that experience in the direction of some kind of richness. As I said, it could be financial, it could be intellectual, emotional, what have you. So that's one thing. Another thing is that, which is a related thing, which is the miracle of compound interest works not just for money, which we all know, but for knowledge, trust, and integrity too. In other words, when you start accumulating, we know that if you start accumulating money, you put it away in a bank over 5 or 6 years, the interest won't amount to much. But after 40 years, boy, it really pays. And that's very true with knowledge too. And I say this frequently because when I'm talking to employees, a lot of young employees, that they go to a seminar or something and they listen to a speech and they go, I didn't learn anything, and I wonder about that. I think, boy, that's a mistake, because there's almost nothing. I almost never am in a situation where I go to a seminar or conference, not that I go to them all the time, but when I do, where I don't learn 2 or 3 things with every speaker, and things that I can bring back and profit from greatly. So the reason why this is more obvious to me is because I've been in business and working on my career for 40 years now. So an idea that to a new person might be worth very little, possibly a $1 an hour raise, to me it could be worth $100,000 or $1 million, just applied with the leverage I have now of being in business, being in control of businesses, being involved in networks of business people, and so on. So anyway, it's an observation about what happens. In other words, if you just keep your nose to the grindstone, keep building your businesses and your wealth and your portfolios and investments, that as time goes on, everything just gets easier and all the benefits get greater. Another thing that I say frequently in when I write right now to the Palm Beach letter people is, and when I first said this, I thought I was going to get nasty letters from my colleagues in the industry, is that the most important factor in building wealth is not ROI. It's not the return on investment. The entire investment industry is about getting a higher rate of return. In fact, for 90% of the people, that's insignificant. What matters is your net investable wealth, how much money you have to invest in these passive investments like stocks and bonds. And the fastest and surest way of developing a high net investable wealth is to increase your income while maintaining your expenses. This is basic.
That really was noteworthy what you just mentioned there, because I have, I'm sure I've come across it, and I've got actually a whole page in front of me of all of the notes I've ever taken from your stuff. But that's such an epiphany to think and that's one of the challenges that I've had. And we've, I think, talked about this in the past down in Florida, and it's been one of my biggest challenges when it has come to learning finance, because the last 10 years of my life were spent learning how to make money as an entrepreneur and as a business owner. Mm-hmm. I got very good at that. And then no one really talked about what to do with the money that I made. So I made every mistake in the book, and I've, lost it. But we've got a lot of entrepreneurs who are going to be hearing this, and many of them, myself included, have a proclivity for taking that appetite for risk that I have in businesses as an entrepreneur and applying that to my finance life. Yeah. And I've been very attracted in my first few years looking for that home run kind of investment. And if it wasn't returning at least 30% a year, I just wasn't interested. And that has worked.
I'll tell you what. When somebody says, and I've heard that a million times, Mike, but to the trained wealth-stealing broker, no prettier words can ever be spoken than somebody telling him, "No, I'm not interested." I remember I was once talking about a real estate opportunity in front of a group of high net worth people, and a guy raises his hand and goes, "I'm not interested in anything that I can't do a 10-bag on." And so I thought to myself, "Oh, good luck to you." No, I never had that problem because I was never a risk-prone entrepreneur. I was always the ultimate chicken entrepreneur. So I've always been, I came from a background of scarcity. I never wanted to take risks. In fact, I have a book called The Reluctant Entrepreneur. That's about why you can, how you can. If you look back on your own career, like I'm sure you'll see that many of the risks perhaps you took perhaps weren't so necessary. That by being being careful, and there are other ways to get into a market and build it up. Of course, in the competitive market, it gets higher. But I don't do that. I'm very opposed to risk, and I'm not the least bit interested. To me, the return of my capital is much more important than the return of my capital. If you put two people together, one of them has money and the other has knowledge. After they've done the deal, the guy with money will have knowledge, and the guy with knowledge will have the other guy's money. Mm-hmm. And that's how I look at these things. And so, I think that you really have to be very happy. Here's how I look at it. There are basically four categories of let's say, wealth building. One of them is entrepreneurship, where you go into business for yourself. And that, as you know, gives you the greatest potential, both in terms of creating income and also asset accumulation, that your business can actually become worth more and more so that you can sell it one day for multiples of its earnings. The second area and that kind of business activity, you can generate the equivalent of an ROI of 25 to 35% a year for many, many years. And in fact, during the course of a normal business growth, a smaller business growing into being a multi-million-dollar business, there'll be years when you're doubling your size, as I'm sure you know. And that you can't find anywhere else. Next best is real estate, which can give you a return of 8 to 15% safely if you do it the way I do, which is income real estate, not buying and flipping, not counting on people, not taking any risk. I don't want to count on the fact that the market is going up. I want to believe that things are the way they are right now, and I can make money right now. And then the third category is typical, what I call passive investments, stocks and bonds and stuff like that. And then the fourth is what I call speculative investing. And those are all the things that you're talking about, where people come to you and they tell you they're limited partnerships, they're all kinds of wild deals where you're going to, they're very exciting because they show you all these great ways that you're going to make money. I can tell you that I do reserve a portion of my net investable wealth for those type of investments, but it's 1/10 of 1%. That's what I allocate towards those type of investments, because I know with certainty that I'm going to lose all my money when I. In fact, we've had a little group at Agora where all the principals of Agora, about 6 people, very, very wealthy, very well connected people, and all famous people in the investment world. We've been coming to each other with ideas, and one guy comes with the idea, everybody invests in it. The other guy comes with an idea. These are the top guys that have been doing this for about 20 years. And Mike, we have a perfect track record. Perfect.
100% loss.
We've lost 100% of our money on every single deal.
Oh, boy.
So those are the categories, those are, I call speculations. And I just, as long as, if I invest, and this is another thing and this may be helpful to you, you're never going to, if you like risk, and all of us like risk to some extent, you like it perhaps more than I do. The trick is when you go into a business deal, you've got to be able to identify it as a speculation. And we could talk for hours about how to do that. But and I cover this a lot in my Creating Wealth essays. But if you do identify it as speculation and you're going to do it, you have to pick a number that an amount of money that you're going to invest, that if you lose every penny of it, you won't be angry. You won't be angry at yourself. You won't be angry at the guy that brought it to you. And that should be your limit. That I call that my do not kill number, because I once made a big investment with a guy that I knew he was going to sooner or later cheat me. So I asked myself, how much can I lend him so that if he does cheat me, I won't feel compelled to kill him. I don't kill anybody. So he was in no danger, but I was in danger of feeling like a schmuck for the next 40 years of my life.
Well, so that's what you mentioned earlier that really, brought this to the forefront for me. And it's one of the primary lessons that I've learned from you over the last, couple of years, is that I believe, if I had to sum it up right now, I believe that I was confused with accumulating money and using investments to accumulate money. Meaning I was trying to go into a deal that would do 30 to 50% a year and use that to accumulate more money. And I can see. Yeah,
I know when you're making all the money, like as you were, and when you've got a business that's going well, you do feel like that. 5-10%. I spit on that. I remember when I was that way a little bit when we were negotiating a real estate deal with ourselves in Baltimore, and we were buying buildings that we would then rent back to our businesses. And one of my partners at the time, well, I tell you, it was Bill Bonnery. We were trying to decide how much income we should get from renting to ourselves. And I was, I wanted 15-20%. Bill was arguing for 5%. And I said, 5%? That's ridiculous. I mean, who wants to make 5%? He goes, well, I think that's a pretty good return. And, 15 years later, I look back and I say, you know what? He wasn't far wrong. 5% isn't too bad. You get 5% of your money, especially if it's over 40 years and there's zero risk in it, it's not so bad. I certainly am not happy with 5%, but he wasn't as crazy as I thought he was.
So, a couple of the rules that I've gathered from you, I believe this was actually from a Palm Beach letter series that really caught my attention, was never lose money. And that is the first time that I really had heard that and accepted that as an actual possibility or a strategy. And so that
there's a corollary to that, which it's funny. Look, sometimes people just say they criticize my books or whatever. They tell me I haven't heard it before, and I just want to warn the reader. I'm going to tell them nothing that they haven't thought about before. But sometimes, the things that really change your life are the things that you have thought about a million times before. But for some reason, they've never been articulated in a way that makes you put them into action. But the reason why you've heard these things over and over again is because they're true. And people that have had success in life and want to share the honest truth with you are saying all the same things. So one of them is certainly never lose money. Lots of people have said that before in different ways. The corollary to that is get richer every year, get richer every day. Right. I had this thought when I woke up. Geez, if I could just get richer. So the way you do those things, for me, I said, how can I do that? Well, I certainly can't have all my investable wealth in stocks and bonds. What if the stock market crashes, across the board? How am I going to get richer then? So it became obvious to me I wanted to develop a plan where I could get richer every single, I like the idea of day because it just seemed more motivating. But obviously, let's just say year, where every year I would be wealthier than I was the year before. And that I would never lose money in any investment, which of course is also a kind of impossibility, but I would never lose any more money than I was prepared to lose, perfectly happy to lose on an investment. And that overall, I would just become wealthier. And I put that into practice about 20 years ago, and it's worked. But to achieve it, I immediately understood that there were a lot of things that I could and couldn't do. And one of the things I couldn't do is I couldn't invest in speculations, or I could only invest less than 1/10 of my net investable wealth because all that money was going to disappear. And that I had to find investments that had a high level of safety and a reasonable ROI and, if possible, income. My primary thing always is if I'm investing, I want income from it, because income is much more predictable, and it's going to increase my net investable wealth. And so that's what I try to do. And it makes, once you start thinking that way, it makes a lot of decisions a lot easier. If you get into any investment, you got to ask yourself, what if this goes wrong? What is the downside? Can I live with it? What if it gets complicated? Is there a plan B? If it's a business, is there another way of salvaging this if our predictions don't turn out to be accurate?
I'm sure there are. I'm sure everybody's wondering, right now. Well, what does Mark Ford invest in? Primarily, would you be willing to share maybe some of the higher level pieces of your strategy?
I think about 40% of my net worth is in direct ownership of entrepreneurial businesses, which means that I have direct interest ownership in all kinds of businesses, but all businesses that I know intimately, that I've been involved in. Many of them are publishing businesses. Some of them are merchandise marketing businesses and all kinds of businesses, but they're businesses I bid in. I understand how they work. I have some say in them. I like to, if I'm going to invest in something, in a business, I like to know the business well, not from an outside point of view, not that I can understand the annual report, but that I actually know how sales are made. And so I can make a judgment about whether the CEO of the business knows what he's doing and the people around him are any good. And then I want some control. I don't need actual legal control, but I want to know that the CEO will listen to me if I make a suggestion to him, so that we can correct the business if it's going. So anyway, 40% of my net worth is invested in businesses like that, 2 or 3 of whom I consult with, and I generate a lot of income from that too. Another 35% of my net worth is in real estate. It's always been a very big part of my wealth building strategy. It's always worked very well for me. I never invested in the future. That is to say, I did make 1 or 2 small investments when I allowed somebody that worked for me to make investments I told her were wrong, and I thought I was going to teach her a lesson, and that cost me. But other than that, when it comes to my own, I invest for income. I have a very simple formula that I follow. I was not in the market buying up property when they were overvalued in 2007 towards 2008, even 6. I started getting out, and then I went right back in 2010. Early in 2010, started buying everything I could, and it wasn't because I could predict the market. It's because I don't predict the market. I don't care which way prices are going. What I care about is income. Can I buy this house and get a good rate of return on the income, the rental income from the property? So that's been a big part of my portfolio. And now I'm investing in, I never believed in stock investing. I used to invest a minor amount of money in index funds because, theoretically you can get 8 or 9% over the long run. But I never liked stocks because I felt that, heck, I can barely predict the the profits, the yearly profits of companies that I own and run. How am I going to predict what GE is going to do, or McDonald's, or so on? But that changed when I met Tom Dyson and started working with all his people, and I saw that Tom had a very similar approach to investing in stocks and bonds as I did in businesses. And I started investing in his portfolio. It's called the Performance Portfolio, which is basically a typical stock market portfolio. You're trying to beat the market. And we've done well. And when the market, when and if the market comes down, we have a way of getting out. We have a plan B, a very sophisticated trailing stop loss system that's protected us. I recently invested $2.5 million in a portfolio I created for myself, which is called the Legacy Portfolio. Actually, Tom did it, but I for the first time I had read a book on Warren Buffett, believe it or not. 63 years old, and I got all excited about, holy mackerel, Tom, you got to listen to that for him. And he was kind of smiling. I said, look, I know everybody's done it, but I want it for me. I want you to create a portfolio of Warren Buffett-like stocks that I can put money in and never sell them and only buy more of them. And he did, and I put $2.5 million into that, and I'm putting more into it every month. And we developed some new little tricks that make it even better. And from my point of view, I'm very proud of it. So I got some money in that. I had a lot of money in bonds, municipal bonds. As I'm sure your readers know, bonds are just not that attractive anymore. So I have not bought new bonds, and I've been selling the bonds as they come to maturity. I never traded bonds. I just bought them and held them. They were a retirement vehicle for me. And I've been taking the money from the bonds that are mature, and I've been buying more legacy stocks of them. And then if the bonds get downgraded, there's been some downgrading in the past few years, I sell those too. So I think that, and then I have gold. I bought a bunch of gold at $350. I've got gold. Oh, and then I have my art collection. I have a very substantial art collection.
It's amazing. I've had the privilege of getting to experience that up close and personal. It was phenomenal. What an amazing office to work in every day.
Yeah. It's a fun way of investing. Anyway, I've written so much about it. I know most people have no interest in it, so I won't waste the time of your readers by talking about it. But for those who are interested, it's a wonderful way of accumulating long-term wealth and enjoying your life while you do it.
When you were in your 30s and really kind of your first 10 years, down this path, did you have a fairly strategic methodology for investing your income, maybe say on a monthly basis, where it was automatically parsed into different buckets and very systematized? Or did you, as an entrepreneur, we have tendencies to have big chunks of revenue come in, maybe from a new product launch or something like that, and then maybe it's dry for a couple of months and it's a bit more sporadic. How did you approach that?
Again, everything was dictated by fear. I only did two things when I started making money. I invested in bonds, AAA rated, tax-free municipal bonds that are insured. And at that time, I was getting like 6.5% on my money, which on a taxable basis is equivalent to over 10%, so it was quite good. And I bought some real estate, and then I paid off all my debt. The first thing I started doing is, of course, I moved into a bigger house. I think the house that I moved into after I started making money cost like $650 or something like that. And I started just paying that off. Most of I would put some money in bonds. Occasionally I get a real estate deal, but mostly I just paid off my debt because I figured I wanted to keep the house, and I paid off my car loans. I stopped buying cars with anything but cash. So I was very conservative, cash and paying off debt. And then, when as business grew and the income got to the point where there was no more debt and and it was just accumulating, and then I started looking more seriously into real estate. But I never, I was always afraid of stocks and bonds. Stocks, not bonds. I didn't get into stocks in any serious way until really just a couple of years ago when I started working with Tom. Until then, all I had was a couple of $1 million in no-load index funds, that I had Steve Sugar pick out for me, which were fine, but at best you can keep up with the market. Usually not quite, but that's what they're meant to do.
And how old are your kids now?
The oldest is 34, or 33 or 34, and then 32, and then 26.
And what are you teaching them, when it comes to this topic, when it comes to money? Do they come to you for advice and say, "Hey, Dad, and this is a very conscious strategic plan," or are they off on their own doing their own thing?
Number 3 son does. Number 1 and number 2, they weren't too interested in my advice, perhaps because I was giving it to them so much when they were young. I write. I always hope my kids will read my books, because I often think of them, especially when I wrote a book called Automatic Wealth for Graduates and other people just starting out, and it was really written for my kids. But all my kids' friends seem to be able to. They seem to enjoy my books, and not so much your children. And I don't think my wife has ever read a page of my books.
Wow.
In any case, So I'm for my children. My kids are all my readers for me, and I hope my biological kids read my books as well. But what I try to tell my biological, the main concern that I have is that Kathy and I have had in teaching them is that they're not entitled to anything. And we've told them since day one that they never get a nickel of our money. It was a lie, but they believed it. So they never asked for anything. And I'm very proud to say that when my second son was living in New York, he was trying to make it in the music industry, and he was making, 1 year he made $14,000 living in New York City. I don't know if you know what that is.
I can't even imagine.
And he never asked for a nickel.
Yep.
Which I was very proud of. So when your kids are young, you want them to be great at everything. When they become adults, you realize that what you really wanted is for them to be independent, financially, emotionally independent of you, so they can live beyond you. They can beyond after you die, and you want them to be kind. And we have that with our children, so I'm very blessed. I'm happy. And other than that, I try to let them know that making money in itself is not virtuous, but it's required. We are responsible for ourselves in the world, and as you pointed out, making money is simply a symbolic representation of the value that we're providing other people, and it's how we take care of our family and ourselves and our friends, and of course, if you can accumulate wealth, then it's so much the better. But I don't want them to think for a moment that the guy that makes them more money is more virtuous. I don't believe that for a second. I try to let them know that after their income reaches the point where they can have a comfortable income, where their debts are non-existent or easily can be easily handled. They can pay for a little bit of travel, going out to dinner now and then. Everything else is just the size of the toys. It doesn't really make your life any better. And then the final thing I really am concerned about, that I don't talk to them explicitly, but I hope that they understand, is if your father has had success like I've had, you don't want to compete with your father. I don't want my children feeling like they have to compete with me financially. Out-earn me. I don't want them to live their lives thinking about stuff like that, and they haven't. Anyway, I've got a million other more particular things I've talked to them about and talked to my readers about in terms of being successful as an employee. If you want to become wealthy that way, it's perfectly possible to become wealthy and never leave the life of an employee. But there are ways of generating a lot of income from employees, and there's ways of not. And anyway,
on that topic, what would you have to say? Because I have no idea what your answer is going to be to this, but if you are an employee, you're working in corporate America, you're making, let's say, 80 to 120, grand a year, and you do have ambitions to build wealth, but you're in really, right now you've been in and you're continue to be in the retail financial services industry. You've got your 401k, you've got your mutual fund. You're plugged into the retail middle class financial, machine. Right. What would you say around that?
My first advice would be to get out. You're never going to do better than the path that's been set out to you if you're in the world of corporate America, being an employee in a big corporate bureaucracy. You have to get out. The way to become rich as an employee is to go to work for an entrepreneurial company that's growing. That's how to get rich. Can you do that? Absolutely. All you have to do is start studying companies. Start looking around at small companies that are growing. That, remember, if a small company is growing, by that I mean a company that already has, let's say, 20 or 30 people and has less than 1,000 people. A company in that range is growing usually very quickly and has a great need for superstar employees. So you have to, now step number one is work for that company, not the corporate company that's going to you're going to be on the treadmill forever, no matter what you do. And two, go into that company, start by being a valuable employee. A valuable employee is somebody that does more than he's ever expected to do and impresses his boss. Then once you've got to there, you've got to become an invaluable employee. An invaluable employee is someone who learns a financial valuable skill and employs that in his business. There are only so many financial valuable skills. They're marketing, they're producing profitable products, they're managing profits, they're salesmanship. So basically, there are two sides of the ledger from a businessman's point of view, and I'm sure you know this having employees of your own. There are the people that you need to run your business properly, to deliver the products, customer service, and so on. And then there are people that make the money for you, that create the marketing copy, the marketing strategies, and manage the profits. Those are people that have financially valuable skills, and those people are always going to have much safer jobs and will be paid much better than the people on the other side of the ledger. So get on the right side, get in an entrepreneurial company, get on the right side of the ledger, become a real expert in a financial valuable skill, whether it's writing advertisements or buying advertisements or managing profits, like a profit center manager, and start doing the work of the highest grossing employee, even while you're not in his position. Start figuring out a way to help that business grow. And as you become better and better, since it's a growing company, they'll be thrilled to promote you and put you in a position where you could eventually start making the equivalent of having a shareholder stake in the business, even if it's a salary structure that's the equivalent, where it has profit incentives built into it, and even buyout bonuses that are equivalent to owning shares in the business. That's all very possible with the right kind of business. But you're not going to get one of those jobs by sending your resume. You're going to get one of those jobs by walking into the office of a particular person you've been studying and saying, Mr. Jones, I just need 10 minutes of your time. I admire you so much for having done this, and I just hope you could give me some career advice, and then going in and blowing him away with how much you know about him and his business's biggest problem. And you, by the way, you have a couple ideas you'd be happy to share with him if you'd be interested. That's the kind of person that's going to get hired and is going to be in a fast track and is going to, basically that's what I did.
Really?
I've started businesses, but my primary businesses that I work with, I didn't start. I joined my first business in Florida, and I joined Agora after I'd retired.
How did you become involved with Agora? Did you walk into Bill's office, or how did that work?
Well, what happened is I retired. Bill knew me because I had my first, after I decided to get rich, the first thing I did was I invented something called the Oxford Club, which is it's a very successful, still is a successful investment advisory service that Agora publishes. And Bill knew me from that, and that was the big rage back then. It was like End of America was today. And so I had a reputation as like a wonder kid. And Bill he told me later, he tried to get me to work for him. I don't even remember that. But obviously Bill was interested, and he tried to replicate the Oxford Club, and he didn't really get it right. And I wrote him a letter, and I said, Bill, nice try knocking me off. This isn't going to work. I know why, you don't. And that intrigued him. And then years later, we sold the Oxford Club to him. We were selling our newsletters. In 1987, we sold our newsletters out because my partner correctly foresaw the crash in the market, but he thought it would be the end of the newsletter industry. It wasn't. But we got out of that industry. And so Bill and I had this relationship that was very cordial, and I retired, and he called me up one day. He said, what are you doing? And I said, well, I'm writing books. And he goes, how's it going? I go, well, the writing's great, but nobody will publish me. When I was a publisher, I couldn't find writers. Now I'm a writer, I can't find publishers. He goes, well, maybe I'll publish your book. Why don't you come up here and talk? And so I went up there, and I was trying to get him to publish my book, and he had these people coming in asking him questions all day about, well, what do we do about this? What do we do about that? And then Bill would go, gee, I don't know. That's how Bill, his secret formula. He just goes, gee, I don't know. Then he turned to me and goes, Mark, what do you think? And I go, well, call this person or do that. Sure, try that. And he got me all excited about the business again. So we made a deal.
That's cool. That's a cool story.
Yeah.
Very cool story. One of the, obviously not one of the most successful, financial publishing empires on the planet, which is amazing what it's turned into these days.
Yeah, it's been a big ride. It's the revenues were, I think, $8 million at that interview, and today they're $500 million.
Yep, unbelievable. One of the topics that I've taken a recent interest in over the last couple of years has been long-term asset protection and basically legacy. I have a 4-year-old son, Chase, now, and so that has been a huge new piece of the puzzle that I'm having to consider and to start to study, and it is it is another topic in finance where there seems to not be a right way, because there are so many different ways of going about it. You have folks like yourself, based on what you mentioned earlier, take a very staunch approach. My child isn't getting anything, and then you have the Bill Gates who say, I'm gonna give you enough so that you don't starve to death, but you're still gonna have to be hungry as well. And there's so many.
Well, I did tell you we were lying.
Yes,
what are you gonna do with your money? Bill once famously said in an essay, he goes, accumulating wealth is easy, getting rid of it is hard. Which I as soon as I saw it, I thought, oh my God, you're going to get a lot of hate mail from that. But there is an issue there, and I'm very interested in that topic. And what there's a whole other hour we could spend. But I'll tell you very briefly what I've done, which is kind of it's an in-between situation. We did tell our children they weren't going to get anything, but then finally, actually, there's a conversation with Bill. Bill has a family office where he tries to get all his family involved in a family office that's going to perpetuate wealth into the future, many generations theoretically. Of course, this is very difficult to do. But but as Bill pointed out to me, he goes, if you just lie to your kids, sure they'll become independent, sure they won't feel entitled, but then one day they're going to inherit a ton of money. Then what? How are they even? The part that scared me was, what if they start fighting with each other?
Right, and that happens all the time.
Yeah, they're great friends, everything's fine. Then you give them money and it destroys their relationship. Who would want that? Better not have it at all. So, so it is a danger, wealth is leaving your kids, it's dangerous, and mostly as parents we're concerned with the moral character of our children. Of course, we want them to be healthy and safe, but beyond that, it's their moral characters that we're concerned with, and wealth is certainly a danger. So what we've done is this, which is a compromise position. We don't have a full family office. I put some of our real estate assets in a family limited partnership, and it's structured as a business, and it's run properly, and it generates income since all my properties are income producing properties. And that income goes for two reasons. It goes to acquiring more businesses that will then produce more, but it also goes to fund a family charity. It's called the Mark and Kathy Ford Family Foundation or something like that. And we have a big community center in Nicaragua where we have we have a big sports complex with baseball, soccer field, basketball, blah, 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 and mixed martial arts. And then we have educational facilities, trade schools. It's a big thing, and it's expensive to run every year. So part of the purpose, the social purpose of this business that the boys now own most of, Kathy and I are 2% owners, but we direct it, is to fund that thing. But very soon, right now, the income is about equal to what it takes to fund that. But very soon, there's going to be more income, and then they'll decide what to do with it, whether they want to use that extra income, leave it in cash, and use it as a bank in case any of them need it or what have you. But the part I like about it is that right now, while we're still there, they're learning how to work together. Like one of our sons, he's in the music business. I asked him to take over managing the real estate portfolio entirely. So he manages that real estate as a portfolio, not managing the properties. We have property managers. But he does the spreadsheets, he does the analysis, and he makes recommendations to the family about whether we should move out of this, buy that, switch that over. And that kind of thing. And for that, he gets a salary. And this allows us to teach our kids that there's a value for what he's doing, and the value is a replacement cost. If he doesn't do it and we hired somebody from the outside, what we would pay him, that's the amount that he earns. And that's an important thing for young people to understand in business, is the difference between working for a business and equity. The equity you have, you cannot be contested. It's not tied to anything, your contributions. It's just your equity. And it's a big lesson, and a lot of young people in business don't understand it. But they get to go through that, and they get to practice being nice to each other because their parents are listening. Oh, that's a good idea. Have you thought about this? Oh, no, blah, 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 blah. So I feel like, that we're kind of actively training them to be decent partners with each other and not to allow the fact that they're siblings to get in the way and turn into a bad situation. And also, it's just a portion of our wealth. It's not all. It's just a portion that's of a size that if they want, and they could develop it into become something much, much bigger in 20 or 30 years if they want, and that could become very big, or they could leave it at this size and just use it to fund the charity.
Who do you study, or do you work with a firm in regards to all of this? But how are you modeling someone? Or is this something that I know Bill Bonner is super passionate about this, and obviously wrote the book on the subject. What would you say about that?
No, I can't recommend. That's been a big failure of mine. I'm not interested in reading what other people have to say about wealth building or money, and it is a failure, as proven by the fact that I finally read a book on Warren Buffett, got so excited about it. I've never been interested in reading all these people that are out there. I don't know why. I just enjoy figuring it out myself. So I can't recommend anybody to you. I would just recommend my own writings, which are all over the place, and especially if your subscribers decide to, if your listeners decide to become subscribers to the Palm Beach Letter for only $49, they get Creating Wealth for free.
Well, Lord knows.
And they will be overloaded with all my ideas, including my ideas on how to work with your kids and so on.
Very cool. Yeah, I mean, obviously we are big fans and have sent you guys thousands of customers. So
you certainly have, and we appreciate that. Yeah,
yeah.
My
absolutely.
children appreciate it too. Another thank you.
So I have been reading an article recently this morning, and yesterday on compound interest, and actually it was an interview with Tony Robbins, who's coming out with his book on money, which I'm very excited to read as well. But he was talking about the magic of compound interest, which I have neglected to take advantage of so far in my life, which is clearly a huge failing. And so right now I see, and I have an opportunity to basically let Chase take advantage of that. And even if I just took 20 grand and put it in an index fund right now when he's 4 years old, when he's 60.
Hey, there is a book I can recommend to you on that. It's called Seeds of Wealth.
Okay.
And it was written by my brother, Justin Ford. Agora Financial publishes it. I think they still do. But he developed something for his kids where it's not just what you've just said, which is you put 20 grand right now, he's going to be a multimillionaire by the time he's ready to retire. If you could just segregate it, and all you have to teach him is to leave that alone, and you invest that stuff in Warren Buffett type stocks, and he's going to be fine. But it's also about teaching him as he gets older, putting half of the savings into this fund, and developing good habits.
Yeah, and that's the dilemma. Is the question I ask myself is, should I do that? Should I put that money in and let it get to that point? And do I let them know about it or not?
Well, yeah, I know. Look, that's what we were talking about.
Yeah.
I mean, all I can recommend to people is what I did. So it's not. What we did is we lied to them, and we told them they weren't getting anything. And then later on, when they were old enough, we felt that their characters had been formed, and they had proven, like when Patrick didn't ask us for a nickel when he was basically starving. He was basically eating like noodles once a day, and he still wouldn't ask us for money. Of course, when you have money, you don't want your kids to. You want your kids to benefit from your wealth, but on the other hand, what good does it do if they turn into horrible people, and so I don't know what the answer is, but I think that you can probably do it. What I would do is I'd do it anyway secretly, and then not necessarily, and then use the Seeds of Wealth idea to have him build up his own, or maybe you have like a matching a matching thing. You
Sure.
put the money in, the 20 grand, and you let it grow. And then for every time that as he grows older, will put something in, tell him you'll put the same amount of money in this other fund. And this other fund only comes to him later, or, if you would disclose it to him or something later on. I don't know how you would work that, but I don't know what the answer is.
Yeah,
but,
it's such an endless topic, which is why it's so fascinating. It's a challenge, really, what it is.
Yeah. But you know what I think, Mike? If you have good, you and your wife, as you do, if you have basically good principles and you believe in being independent and earning your way in the world and not living off other people and not, cheating other people and so on, your kids will get that. And I say that because one of our best friends, this couple, that they just spoil their kids unbelievably, just terribly spoil their kids. And we were all friends. We're all very close. We travel all over. For the last 25, 30 years, their kids are, admittedly, they have very high standards in terms of everything they buy and, what kind of wine they drink, these kids. But they're both completely independent, and they're completely sweet children. They're not spoiled. I don't know how they did it. The only thing I could say is that our friends have good characters, and although they spoil their kids developed, and lucky for them, because this guy went broke a few years ago. He was in the real estate business, went broke. And his children ended up, not just being supportive and helping him out. And so I think ultimately, if you and your, I think that if you display the right habits, then hopefully your kids will pick up on them.
Very good.
But, and that's what they never did. I mean, they spoil their children, but they always let their kids know they weren't entitled to these things.
Right. Huge difference.
Right.
Well, we're coming up at the top of the hour here, so I wanted to clearly respect your time, but I wanted to ask you if there was, one grandiose piece of advice or piece of wisdom that you could share, with folks who are listening right now, men specifically who really want to build a great life for themselves, become independent, leave a legacy for their family. What would be, the one piece of wisdom that you could share that would set them on that path?
All right, this is going to be a cliche, but what set me on the path was I'll tell the story, so I'll truncate it. I took a Dale Carnegie course when I was first working for this business in Florida. I was an editorial chief of a small editing department, and in this course, it was a 14-week course, and 1 week was about goal setting, and the chapter said that most people don't accomplish anything because they don't set goals, but some people have too many goals, and they don't accomplish anything because their goals are always in conflict. If you're one of these people, you're going to have trouble with this exercise, which was to write down all your goals, narrow them down to 10, narrow them down to 5, narrow them down to 3, and then pick one. And then for the rest of the course, which was still like 7 or 8 weeks, all you could do is focus on that one goal. You couldn't pay any attention to your other goals. My goals were, I wanted to be a teacher, I wanted to be a writer, I wanted to be a mixed martial artist, I wanted all these things. And when I listed my goals, of course I wanted to be rich too, like everybody did, but I didn't feel that was like a big goal for me. Certainly teaching and writing were much more important to me at the time. But when I went before the class, I had to pick one, and at the very last moment, I just decided I would pick making money, because I thought, well, hell, if I don't like, everything's easier with money, so, and then I made that announcement, and then I followed it for the next 7 or 8 weeks. All I thought about every day, and this is when I started to get that idea, was, is this an action that will make me richer in the long run or poorer? And I tell you, Mike, that completely changed my life. Everything got clear, like overnight. All these questions that were confusing were no longer confusing. In other words, what was the difficulty I was having making decisions or understanding things was not the intrinsic difficulty of the situation. It was because I had all these conflicted values in my head. But once I put that on top as my number one priority, everything became clear. There is another side to that. When you put that on top, everything else is secondary. And that means your family. If you decide to become rich, I think it's total BS when people pretend that they can balance all this stuff. If you want to have 100% or 90% plus chance of becoming wealthy, make that your top priority. But be careful, because everything else is second. And that means, you can pretend like everybody does. Oh, no, I take care of all my responsibilities. But you can't. You're going to be the guy that's going to be staying late, working 16 hours a week. You're going to be the guy that when you're driving with your family in a car, you're thinking about the deal that was going on and how can you fix it. You're going to be that guy. But if you are that guy, you will become successful. That's what it's all about. Being the other person that's completely perfectly balanced and somehow is in the present with his family and works only 40 hours a week and still becomes successful, to me, that's a fairy tale. Maybe it exists. It certainly doesn't. It never existed in my life. I don't know whether I'm encouraging or warning your listeners, but that made a big difference, making your top priority.
Well, if you want outsized wealth or whatever the category is, you're going to have the other categories will suffer as a result. And
if you meant right,
the interesting.
Look what happened to Mozart.
Exactly. And one of the I will preface it your warning label there with a piece of good news, which is one of my future guests coming up here on the podcast is a woman who completely changed my life over the last year when it comes to relationships. And one of the topics that she covers is specifically that one, as it's basically a stage that every man goes through in his life, typically in his 25 to 38 year age category, where you're essentially building your empire. And typically relationships can suffer. And the good news is there are ways to work through that successfully with a spouse and with their support. If you're armed with the right kind of information, which is a topic we are going to cover. And
well, I will be sure to listen to that. I only learned one thing about that. When you wake up in the morning, you turn to your wife and you say right away, "Honey, I apologize." And she says, "For what?" You go, "For everything I'm about to do, for everything I do for the rest of the day that you're going to be disappointed in me for." That sometimes helps.
That is a perfect.
I'm sure your guest will have better advice than that.
Well, that's a perfect capstone. I think to end this session with. That's awesome, and very true. Well, thank you, Mark, so much, gentleman Mark Ford, and for always being a role model to so many people, and your contribution to the world. You've left and continue to leave quite a growing legacy. And for all of the listeners out there, we'll have all of Mark's resources and the Palm Beach Letter and his books listed in the show notes, so you guys can go take advantage of those. And so, Mark, thank you so much for your time today. Really, really do appreciate it, and look forward to maybe doing another session with you in the future.
All right. Thank you, Mike.
Thank you so much. Take care.